So the very first thing I want to talk about is that translation is sticky. We deal with this a lot. A lot of times I'm like, I don't like how the Bible translation that we use is portraying a person or even the flavor of a word. We know that we often use the word righteousness when the actual word is justice. So we're going to deal right up front with the word prostitute. So lots of people throughout the biblical interpretation have no schema for women making their own way in a way that it doesn't involve sex work. So whether or not it involves sex work, that is the oldest profession, but it is often, because we have such a moral color on that work in particular, it is a way to dismiss and disgrace, especially women who were pretty amazing in the Bible. So we're going to talk about the translation of the word zonah. So the word zonah is the word that often gets translated as harlot, and often as prostitute. But the actual root of the word is the word hunger, which, could be a euphemism, who knows, maybe, but because people are predisposed to think of women poorly, especially in the biblical narrative, especially in our modern interpretations of it, it actually might have collapsed the character of Rahab into something that is easy to put away. So the verb hunger, when zonah is someone who meets a hunger. So it could be sex work, maybe. But because she runs her own home, people think that means brothel, but it might have actually been more closely an inn. Someone on the wall, so someone who would greet travelers and give them a place to stay as they were entering Jericho. So there's a couple of interesting, historical interpretations of the character of Rahab. There are a lot of men who they're like, yep, she was a prostitute, and therefore we're going to cast all of these aspersions on her character, right? But if she's an innkeeper and she's a hostess, there is another interpretation that's actually pretty ancient. So Josephus, one of the historians in the ancient world, he was one of the people who saw her more as an innkeeper, who then had all of the hot gossip, basically, because there were lots of people eating food around her table. So often, text asks more questions of us than it answers. And so was Rahab a prostitute? I don't know. But there is more room for more fullness of life, especially for people who are characterized as women, because we don't often give them, we kind of have two modes that they can be in. There's either the virgin or there's the whore, right? And so I just want to problematize that a little bit and invite us into wondering about who Rahab may have been, as opposed to, her title being Rahab the prostitute. Either way, it's kind of amazing because she is one of the women who is named by name in the lineage of Jesus. So there is a lot of interpretation that happens outside of what the text actually gives us. But perhaps this is a spoiler alert, but it's kind of like a headcanon kind of spoiler alert, in that it is, in Midrash, there is an understanding that maybe she wound up marrying Joshua. That she wound up marrying Joshua, and that is how she was part of Jesus' lineage. Either way, she is named as Rahab the harlot in Jesus' lineage, specifically in Matthew. So we know that this woman is really important, and this is her story, where we have, after the Exodus, we have the Israelites. Moses was told that he would not be able to enter the promised land, so Joshua becomes the leader of the Israelites, and he sends spies into Jericho to take a look at the city and make sure that it is as good as they are hoping that it will be. So then Jericho leadership gets wind of this, and they're looking for these spies, and they go to Rahab's house, and she hides them, therefore betraying the leadership of her own people, and holding sanctuary for these spies who were about to honestly be murdered because of the infiltration of an enemy people into the city of Jericho. So what do we know about Jericho? What's the big story that happens right after this? The trumpets and the marching and the walls, exactly, right? Yeah, so this is the beginning of what that is the culmination of, right? So we march around the city and these impenetrable walls, these walls that have this huge reputation for being just like indestructible, they fall down, and it allows people to move freely through the land of Canaan. Right? So this is the first part of that, where these people are seeing like, what, is this going to be a viable place for us to live? And someone who lives there in Jericho, and if she was a sex worker, she's literally on the wall. She's literally on the margins. And she is the one who is helping them, saying, this structure that seems impenetrable needs to come down, and I want to be part of bringing it down. But I'm scared, because my family could be at risk. So will we be okay if I help you destroy this thing that maybe needs destroying? It was a 2-protest week this week. That's how I'm kind of managing my time. Like, is this a 1-protest week? Is it a 0 protest? This last week was a 2-protest week. So last week we talked about Judge Hannah Duggan and the ways that she stood up and tried to protect members of her community who immigration enforcement was trying to take into captivity. And she helped them get out the back door through her private office, and she was arrested by federal agents for her aid to that community. And I didn't know it, but literally that morning here in Colorado Springs, more than 100 immigrants in our own city were taken into custody in a huge multi-agency raid on a nightclub that people frequented. There are lots of stories going on around who those people were and whether or not they deserved to be treated the way that they were treated, but we are part of the Sanctuary and Accompaniment Coalition. We have friends who are currently undocumented, and we know now the fear that is right here in Colorado Springs. So I was preaching about something that happened in Wisconsin, but I didn't know that literally hours before I delivered that sermon, it was happening right here. That there is no safe place for our immigrant friends to go, whether they have documents or not. Because currently, even though it is illegal in the state of Colorado only to stop someone based on perceived immigration status, that hasn't stopped law enforcement from doing that to our neighbors. There is fear everywhere. We're watching everything crumble. We're watching the amount of fear, even in our city, increase in ways that our bodies were never meant to hold. It's hard to stay present to everything that's going on. Someone said to me just this morning, I don't recognize my country anymore. And I said, which part? Because there's just so much destruction to witness. And those of us who have a little bit more privilege are a little bit on the fence sometimes. Because it's like, well, we're okay. This is affecting other people, right? I'm cis, so I can understand that my trans siblings are going through a lot, but my body is safe, right? I'm white, so I can understand that my immigrant siblings are going through something, but I'm okay. It won't affect me. And so we use that as a buffer, not to enter into the wound that is this time for so many of us. And I wonder about Rahab. When I was outside of the Sheriff Roy Ball's office on Tuesday, there was someone with a Second Amendment hat who was filming all of us, so I don't want to stereotype, but my guess is he wasn't pro the people protesting. And every so often, people would drive by, and there were a lot of white folks out there, and one of the things that got yelled out the window was race traitor, because that's where we are as a country right now. And I wonder about Rahab, right? She saw newness coming in, new possibility coming in, a wall that was impenetrable maybe could come down if she could help expose a crack in that government, in that in the culture that never understood her, that she was always on the margins of. And I wonder what they called her, if they ever found out that she had hidden these foreigners, hidden these infiltrators, that she was one of the ones that helped eventually the wall come down. I wonder what they called her. I wonder what risk she took to do that, to lie in the face of authority, to protect people who needed protecting in that moment, trusting that this was, like we talked about on Easter, a seed that could be planted that would grow into something big and beautiful, a sanctuary. A sanctuary. She provided a sanctuary. Did they call her a race traitor? Maybe not those words, but it is what she did. She was on the margins of her own society. She looked at these impenetrable walls and she said, honestly, this isn't working. It's not working for me. It's not working for anyone. Here is a possibility of something different happening. We need to tear some of this down. Maybe I can be a part of that. Maybe I can hold some space. Maybe if I cover these people in my walls, if I feed them, if I keep them safe, and they can get word out from behind these walls out into the world, maybe we can do something different. Maybe there might be some hope. I don't know. On Tuesday, I showed up in my clergy collar. On Thursday, I showed up as a medic. I'm first aid trained. And in some of the folks who were protesting, they said, we need a medic. We weren't necessarily expecting it to get hot, like that there was going to be something really bad happening. But what I did is I filled my backpack with water bottles and trail mix, and I was basically the mom friend at the protest. And so if Rahab was an innkeeper, and she was feeding people at her table, and it was there when they were being fed that these plans got hatched, that the possibility of another world became possible. She was holding sanctuary for that which needs to be nurtured, the new life that was coming to bear. And we aren't going to talk about Jericho on its own Sunday, so I'm going to do a little spoiler alert and say that was a joyful protest with trumpets and marching and these impenetrable walls that they didn't think could come down, that the people had so much faith in that were going to protect them. They crumbled under the weight of that joy. That possibility, that belief in a new world where a people who had been oppressed could thrive. I don't know about you, but there is joy in protest. It can be some of the most joyful, gratifying work to be out there in the streets with strangers you have never met who've just become your best friend. Because if you fall or stumble, you've got someone there grabbing your elbow, helping you back up to your feet. You have people who you have never met crying out for the same kind of world that you want to see, and that's what happened at Jericho. But it starts in sanctuary. Joyful, faithful resistance. Rahab saying, this wall that even I live in, needs to come down. And so she built relationships and she brought her family along. And she said, we want to be part of this new thing that is coming. You know, it's scary to watch the things that we thought would protect us start to crumble. There's not one person who it's not affecting. Even you, if you have any kind of retirement account, you've seen what the last 100 days have done. So it's hitting you too, if even in a little bit more of a, I don't know what word I want to use, but it's maybe a little less direct, but you're still seeing the impacts. You are needed now. Whether or not you are marching in the streets, the walls are starting to come down. There is a groundswell of possibility. There is hope and new life that is starting to formulate. The indivisible Colorado Springs is still packing out one of the largest mainline Protestant churches in the city. There are people who are dreaming of the world that you are dreaming of. And maybe you feel like Rahab, alone, just trying to do what you can do in your little marginal space, holding space for the other people who might be able to dream and scheme with you for what might be possible. Maybe it is literally physically opening your home to those who need it in this time. We are not far from that being a necessary thing. But a new world is coming if we make it come. And that is the joyful resistance of the story of Jericho. But it starts here with the ideas that we protect, the people that we protect, the joy that we protect here in this moment, maybe even in this place. We aren't strangers to that. Opening our sanctuary to be a sanctuary for those who are at risk. We know how to do that. In this moment, safety, creating safety for each other, the way that Rahab created safety for the spies from Israel. That's what's needed. It is faithful resistance to everything that is going on. It is the place where this new life will be nurtured and born. And it is our duty as faithful people to arise into this moment to provide safe harbor for all those seeking a better world. Amen.